So anyone over the age of bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah is obligated in benching. Little kids, I mentioned yesterday, if they're old enough to begin learning how to bench, so they should learn how to bench, even if they're not going to say the whole thing. You can certainly teach them, and you can even use the name of God whilst you're teaching them to bench, that they should say it the right way, even though you yourself may not have eaten anything, right? So, you've got little children at home and they've had some lunch today, fast day, right? They've had lunch, you haven't. Need I say more? And they're going to, so fine, no problem whatsoever. You can bench with them in order to get them to learn how to bench properly. When you are reciting Birkat HaMazon, right? When you're reciting benching, you have to know that from the time that you start until the time that you end, you should not be talking, right? Which means that it's a little bit like when you're davening the Amidah, right? So you've got to know from the beginning to the end that you're not supposed to be saying anything, and even stopping in the middle is something that you should try to avoid doing, right? Just keep running the whole way through. What happens if you did stop in the middle? What happens if you spoke in the middle? So you don't have to go back to the beginning and start all over again. Even though, for example, if you do that during parts of davening, if you make a break in the middle of davening, then you would have to go back and start at the beginning again. But with benching, you don't have to, but you definitely should not be making any kind of a break whatsoever. So I don't know if you need to go to the bathroom, right? Whilst you're reciting Birkat HaMazon, whilst you're benching, if you need to go to the bathroom in the middle, so trying to get to the end of the bracha and then go off to the bathroom and come back and carry on from where you left off. Now there's a sort of radical concept over here, which is an idea that runs its way through not just benching but through davening in general, that we should really be davening and benching with intent. Concentration. I mean, I apologize for mentioning this, I really do, because it's hard enough. Huh? It's hard enough doing this, it's hard enough just saying the words actually, but having to actually have intent and concentration as well is a somewhat radical, idea. But nevertheless, it's a great thing to do, and you should recite the words slowly and carefully. There's actually in the you'll find in many different sources it says that if you bench properly, right, if you bench slowly and carefully, that it is actually a segula, it's an omen for having wealth. So I once heard from one of the great halachic authorities alive today, who said that people run around all over the world they're called segulot, trying to find things that they can do that will enhance their parnasa, enhance their livelihood, not by doing all kinds of sort of spiritual things. And he says it's really a ridiculous thing to do. He says, because you just have to bench. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us, that if we bench carefully and properly, that's one of the portals that brings us into having a successful parnasa. Yeah.
Can you bench on someone else's behalf? Let's say all of us had a meal together. Can he bench for all of us?
So the emphasis is like this: even though it's possible for somebody to make brachot for you, right, which is what happens, you go to somebody's house for Shabbos and they make kiddush for you, they make hamotzi for you. Come to my house, I'll even eat for you as well. You don't have to do anything, really. You can just sit and, you know what, you don't even have to come. I'll do it all for you. But with benching, the only way that somebody can fulfill your obligation to bench is if you can't bench yourself, right? So if that means that somebody doesn't know how to bench, isn't aware of any of this, you don't have any English benches there to be able to do, and you can't read it in Hebrew, it's impossible. So somebody can bench for you, and every time they make the bracha, you need to answer Amen to the brachas that are being said. However, if you can bench for yourself, then you can't have somebody else do it for you. Interestingly enough, that's where the repetition of the Amidah comes from. The source of the repetition of the Amidah is that when people weren't able to pray for themselves, and they were illiterate, and they couldn't pray, then the Chazan would recite the Amidah for you, and you would say Amen at the end of each bracha, and that was considered as if you fulfilled your obligation to recite the Amidah. You can't rely on the Shaliach Tzibur's recitation of the repetition if you know how to daven yourself, though. It's exactly the same kind of an idea. right? Which means that if you know how to daven, then no, you can't just stand there and say amen to his brachas and have him fulfill your obligation, because the obligation is yours.
So I've had this question come up a lot and heard different opinions. Benching and davening in English, if you understand it and you have the real like emotion behind it, or Hebrew, don't understand it, kind of fall off and just try to read the words.
Yeah. So the truth is that it's very difficult to perhaps to understand what the Mishnah Berurah is saying. The Mishnah Berurah says that if somebody knows how to read Hebrew, that it's better to pray in Hebrew, even if you don't understand what you're saying, than to pray in the language that you do understand. It sounds a little counterintuitive. It really does, because
encourage you to learn Hebrew.
Well, yeah, maybe. But again, the Mishnah Berurah explains that Lashon HaKodesh, the Hebrew language, something which has an inherent holiness to it. And even though I may not understand what I'm saying, I'm tapping into that holiness, even just by using the words. If a person doesn't speak any Hebrew, then they can't read Hebrew, then they can pray or bench in English and achieve the same levels of connecting to God through benching in English as they would if they were benching in Hebrew. It's a kind of a no-lose situation, right?
Okay.
What I always suggest to everybody, which is that if somebody is kind of okay with Hebrew, but just not they don't really understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
Good, okay.
So I should do it.
I think you should do it if you can. You should do it, and I also recommend, again, a somewhat radical idea, but I do recommend perhaps taking off 5 minutes a day, perhaps, and studying what it is that you're saying. There are all kinds of books in English today that deal with prayer, right? So, for example, there's a book called the Shmoneh Esrei, which is all about the Amidah, written by Rabbi Foyer. There's a book called Rav Schwab on prayer. I mean, you go into any well-stocked safer store, and you'll see a mass of different books in English that are written about prayer, and it's terrific. It's fantastic, because what it means is like this. You take off 5 minutes a day, and you can concentrate. For example, if you're looking at the Amidah, you can concentrate on one blessing, not to try to absorb it all in one go. Just to concentrate on one blessing. And then the next time you come to pray, so you'll be more aware of what it is that you're saying. You'll understand it better. I always say like this: the more you understand something, the greater your appreciation for that thing is. And that what's true in every dimension is true in the spiritual dimensions as well. So, for example, if there's anybody here who's into art, for example, right? So. We can all go and look at a painting together and say it's a beautiful painting. But somebody who appreciates art is appreciating. He's not just looking at the painting. He's looking at the art strokes, and he's looking at the depth, and he's even looking at the frame that goes around the painting, right? And everything is contributing to his feeling of appreciation. It's true with everything, actually, and it's true in the world of prayer as well. It's no different. The more details I'm aware of inside of prayer, the more familiar I am with what I'm saying and why I'm saying it, the greater is my appreciation for what it is that I'm saying. And that really only comes with studying, reading. The more you read about it, so the more familiar you'll be with the ideas, and you'll get to that prayer inside of the Amidah, for example. You'll get to that blessing. You'll say, wow, hold on a second. Gosh, this is, I know this. And it adds a whole dimension of wanting anticipation to daven, maybe. I'll give you an example, really a very fascinating example. Inside one of the brachos inside of the Amidah is the bracha of Reuven. In Reuven, we pray that people should be well. And unfortunately, most people know, people who aren't well, and inside of that bracha, that's a very good place to pray for them to get well, to ask God for a particular person that he should become or she should become well. Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, one of the great rabbis from a few generations ago, he says like this: the bracha of Reuven, which is a bracha for health, is the 8th blessing in the Amidah. The number 8 represents things which are beyond nature. Supernatural things. Number 7 is nature, the 7 days of the creation, the 7 days of the week. Anything that's got the number 7 inside of it is going to contain that concept of a natural dimension. Number 8 is that which represents what's called in Hebrew lemala min hateva, things that are beyond nature. And he explains, it's a very fascinating halachic question. He says, how is it permissible for somebody to pray for somebody who's not well if that person has a terminal sickness? Right? There's a concept in halacha, there's a concept of something called tfilat shav, which is praying in vain. Right? You can't take God's name in vain. If I pray for somebody who's got a terminal sickness, isn't that what I'm doing? I'm taking God's name in vain because this person's not going to get well. So it explains Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz that no, that's not the case. Because we the Jewish nation, live lemala min hateva, we are beyond nature. We're in the domain of God, and God can do whatever he wants. And that's why it's okay to pray for somebody to get well. And that's why, he says, the 8th blessing of the Amidah is the blessing of Rufa'enu, that we should be well. Now, normally, this idea that when somebody gets the blessing of Rufa'enu, and now they know that this is tapping into the energy of the number 8, right? That dimension of something which is above and beyond the natural world, that natural dimension. So then maybe that's going to help them to tap into their prayer in a different way, right? Maybe they'll have a whole different approach to reciting that particular blessing than they would have had otherwise. And that's really the idea of details inside of prayer is something which gives us a tremendous appreciation for what's going on. One more halacha for today. It's correct to actually recite benching from some kind of a text. Mm-hmm. Right? It's a recommendation from the Mishnah Berurah. It's not. It's like an interesting thing because the truth is that we are very good at getting distracted. And if you're concentrating, if you've got something open in front of you and you're reading it, then that way you're going to be much more focused on what it is that you're doing. When we close our eyes, it is true that some people get more concentration when they close their eyes, but I think an awful lot of people, they close their eyes and then that's it, they kind of disconnect themselves. There's a famous Jewish joke, which is like a lot of Jewish jokes, it's not very funny, but it's very deep. About a fellow, he's in the shuk, he's in the market and he's squeezing the tomatoes and looking at the peaches and all of a sudden somebody bashes into his chest and he looks up to see who was that, who was so rude, and it's him. He's davening mincha and he's got to the slach lanu where you're supposed to tap yourself on the chest, and of course what had happened was his wife had told him on the way home from shul if he could just go and pick up some fruits and vegetables, that would be much appreciated. So he's already there, right? In his mind he's already there. He's just physically, he's got to finish up davening and then he's going to get there. And again, it's like unfortunately there's an awful lot of that goes along with prayer. And one of the ways of being able to combat that is by just looking inside into a siddur or into a bencher and reading the words rather than allowing you, even if you know it off by heart, rather than allowing yourself to do it off by heart, because that's what leads us to be distracted. I think I've mentioned in the past, but over here, many years ago, in the yeshiva, somebody did a little sketch on Purim night. It was pretty funny, and it's about what this fellow's thinking whilst he's praying. This was in the good old days when they didn't have little players. He came out with this great big boom box, and he sat it down on the table, and you see him, he's davening the Amidah, right? So he bends down real low, and then he bows so low, he bangs his head on the table. And the first thing you hear coming out of this thing is, ouch. And then you get like a 10-minute monologue. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, about what this guy's thinking whilst he's praying. And he's standing there and he's, swaying backwards and forwards and doing all the actions that he's supposed to be doing. But in the meantime, what you hear is what's going through his head. And at some point, he's looking to see where the person next to him is up to, and he sees that the person up to him is he's behind him, and wait a minute, they'll think he's firmer than I am. I got to slow down, right? And then halfway through, like somebody comes collecting money, and he's having like this whole silent negotiation with him about how much he's going to give him, and at the end, you hear him say, okay, steps backwards, 3, 2, 1, left, right, middle, and then you hear him say, wow, that was great. Now, if I could only learn how to say the words. And there's unfortunately, there's a lot of this. Even when we know how to say the words, Right? There's a lot of this. Your mind is just let loose, right? Whilst you're praying, and it goes off on a journey. Who knows where it's gone to and whether it'll ever come back again. Good. What's the bottom line? What have we learned today? We need to take our davening and our benching seriously, and we need to one of the best ways of being able to start doing that is by using a text to daven and to pray from.